everyone is dealing with Obama traffic at the moment, so I'm sure there are going to be plenty of women coming in a little bit late. But nevertheless, we wanted to get started to respect, everyone's time, especially our panelists. So again, thank you for coming. This event is being hosted by Colorful Women's Academy as well as the Multicultural Center. First, for those of you that know, Colorful Women's Academy is a new organization for female or female-identified students of color who are in a graduate or professional program here at OSU. And so our goal for Colorful Women is to provide academic, personal, but also professional support for one another. And one thing that we wanted to do was put together a panel to kind of talk about what does it mean to be a woman of color in the academy. What is that experience like? And Dali Marcos was the one who actually came across this really good article online, and it kind of inspired this program altogether. And that one was called, Different Bodies and Different Lives. Yes, Different Bodies and Different Lives in Academia, Why Roles Aren't the Same for Everyone. So we can share that with all of you later on this evening. And so we thought, why not ask women on campus what their experiences were like in graduate school, as well as now that they were a part of the academy as professors. So Dawn Miles, my dear friend, who's also a graduate student here. She's in the history department. She's a PhD candidate. She's actually going to be the moderator for tonight's program because she's just that special. I owe her big time. And so sit back and enjoy. They're going to answer some questions, but of course we're going to leave about 20 minutes for the audience to ask questions as well. So if you have questions, write them down or just kind of keep them in mind so they can address them later on. Okay? I'm going to pass on to Dawn.
So the way we're going to do it is we'll kind of have everybody answer the first question, but then after that we'll have maybe like 2 of you answer each question so it doesn't get overwhelming. But the first question is, I'm going to kind of let you guys introduce yourselves because you know yourself better. And so we're going to get you to say your name, your hometown, where you went to undergraduate and graduate school, and what you do, like what department you're in, what your exactly is, you do research, stuff like that. So just to kind of give us an idea of who you have up here, and then we can go through the more individual questions. So if you want to start with
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Ortiz. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Communication. I am originally from Mexico, but then lived in Southern California, very, very Southern California, south than San Diego. It was a border town, that's how south it was. Then I lived there for a while, and then I went and finished high school in Tucson, Arizona. So I just say that I'm from the Southwest. That just sums it all up. And so I did my undergrad and my grad program at University of Arizona in Tucson. My research is in the area of media effects, and I look at how media messages influence our perceptions, our attitudes, our feelings towards members of other groups, whether they be racial or ethnic groups or even sexual identity.
My name is Lynn Itagaki. I'm in English and Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies, and I'm really excited to be on this panel tonight. So thank you to the organizers. I was actually born in Hawaii, and but then I moved to Los Angeles. Well, actually, I moved to Orange County, which you know is a world. It's like the orange curtain. But when I was living there, it wasn't as crazy as it is now. Anyway, then we moved to Los Angeles proper, so that was that one. But I was in undergrad at Harvard, and then I was in graduate school at UCLA. And it was there that I really developed my interest in Los Angeles history and literature. And so I actually studied the literature and film of the LA riots of 1992, and that is my current book project. I also teach multiracial feminist theory, women of color, literature, and then also 20th, 21st century American literature.
Hi everybody, I'm Judy Wu. I'm really tired. time today. Let's see. Oh, I was born in Taiwan, came to the United States when I was 6. Grew up in Spokane, Washington, which, like Columbus, is a test market town. Middle America. Went to Stanford for both undergraduate and graduate school. Then came here just as I was finishing my dissertation, and have been here 15 years, something like that. I'm an associate professor in history and women's gender and sexuality studies. I'm also coordinating Asian American studies. And I'm really excited because I just signed up a minor today. We have very few minors. And we have 2 other people who are ready to sign. So we're quadrupling our number. My first book is on Margaret Chung, and she's the first American-born Chinese woman doctor. And she's just a fascinating person. During World War II, all these American military men would gather at her home and eat barbecue ribs and fried rice. She became this adopted mother figure for all these men in the military. It was her way to express this dual patriotism towards China and the United States. But the exciting thing about Margaret Chung is that she's going to be immortalized for a GLBT outdoor museum in Chicago. And it's going to be unveiled this Thursday. So I'm going to go hang out and see what her plaque looks like. I'm excited about that. I just finished a book on American anti-war activists and their international travels, and that looked a lot at African-American, Asian American, Chicana political activists and how their international journeys shape their politics and their identity. And I'm starting a 3rd book project on Patsy Mink, and she's the first woman of color congresswoman. She co-authored Title IX, which mandated gender equality in schools that receive federal funding. And I'm struggling with writing a conference paper right now on her anti-nuclear activism. It's amazing to think how much the United States bombed Pacific Islands and tested nuclear weaponry, or even just conventional weapons. So that's what I'm kind of thinking about right now.
I'm Judy and I are good friends. I didn't even know about her 3rd project, so I'm like captivated. I'm Leslie Alexander, and I never know how to answer the where are you from question because I'm kind of from all over the place.
That's my son.
That's funny.
He's really into Power Rangers right now.
I'm kind of from all over the place. I was born in Chicago, but I was raised in California and the Bay Area and in Southern Oregon. I actually also went to Stanford as undergraduates, and Judy and I think at one point actually even lived in the same dormitory complex, because we both lived in where's Trentos and in Wilbur Hall.
Yes.
Wilbur Hall.
That was many, many years ago.
Yeah. I'm scared to say that. But we didn't actually know each other until we got here. But
we were in the same protest together.
We did, yeah, we were even in the same protest. And we didn't know it until years later. Oh my God, but I went to a graduate school at Cornell, and this is actually my 13th year now at Ohio State. When I first arrived, I was in the history department, and I've recently changed to African American and African Studies. I was supposed to say what my research is on. Dawn is my student, so that's why I always look at her. It keeps me going. I specialize in 19th century African American history. My first book basically looked at the first couple of generations of free people in New York City, looking basically at this transition out of slavery into emancipation, and looked particularly at issues of identity, community formation, and most importantly, the relationship between identity and political activism. So what kinds of sort of political movements and ideas of political consciousness formed among newly emancipated people, and how did that connect to how they saw themselves as free people in the North. And my next book, if I ever can get back to it, is looking at, it's actually also kind of internationalism, but internationalism in the 19th century. So it looks at how Black activists in the 19th century viewed their kind of relationship to other African diasporic nations, particularly those in the Western Hemisphere, and I guess more importantly, how they sort of lobbied and pressured the United States government for changes in their foreign policy towards other African diaspora nations. So I'm looking in particular at Haiti, Cuba, and if I can ever get Portuguese together, but potentially Brazil, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
I remember you saying that when you came over to Kenya. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna learn Portuguese. But
I'm gonna take up Portuguese really quick and just
Okay, so the idea is that I'll ask a question and kind of two of you can choose who answers it, like, so whoever feels comfortable kind of jumping forward can do it. And we'll do maybe 2 people for each question unless somebody has a burning desire to be a third person. And then we can kind of move to the next question so that we leave time for questions at the end. But the first question we have is, have you ever felt it necessary to downplay any aspects of yourself or your research, depending on the position you were looking for?
yeah. I'm not applying for anything, but. Well, when I saw that, I thought that was a really interesting question, because when you apply, well, right now the job market is definitely not in the favor of people who are applying. It's in the favor of people who are hiring. But wherever you go, you need to be able to, I don't want to say sell or market, those are the wrong connotations. But you need to be able to communicate the value of your project to an audience who will not know anything about your project. I mean, they're looking for somebody in your expertise because they don't have any, right? And so you have to be able to talk to people who do the Russian history or the medieval history, or who have nothing to do with whatever it is that you're interested in. And you have to be able to make your project interesting and relevant to that person or to that audience. So you may get just like strange questions out of left field that you don't even know about, but for them it's really important because it's centered to their intellectual interest, right? So I think that's part of the skill of being an academic, is learning how to talk to people from very different backgrounds. And it's, I think, very different from where you are now in graduate school, because you're starting to find people with similar intellectual interests. When you go to someplace else, you're going to be the only one, or maybe one of the few, and it might take a while to find that community.
So maybe if you're, like if you are applying for a position, and let's say that you are part of the LGBTQI community, or you're an activist, like a serious activist, and you know maybe that that's not the kind of color that that department paints. Is that something that you're open about, or is that something that you would think you should keep to yourself when you're applying for a position? Or if somebody finds out about it, right, if you even discuss it. So if somebody asks you about a partner or about children, or, I mean, especially since all of us are women, right? So this idea of like that they get to pry into a certain part of our life because we possibly have children or something like that. Like, so are those things that you would keep to yourself in an interview, or that you should actually kind of share if you know that it's a position that you really want?
They're not supposed to ask you, but they do.
We know that they do, though. Right? We know that the illegal questions get asked.
Yeah, that's something I think you might practice, right? If someone asks you, how do you want to answer it? And I think we all have different ways that we could answer. But you might try practicing that with your advisors or with people that you know, and just practice different ways of saying it. I don't know if you necessarily need to hide different aspects of yourself, but I think you want to foreground those aspects of yourself that are going to give you a better chance of getting that position if you want to be there. If you don't want to be there, then there's no point, right? But if you want to be in that particular environment, you need to think about what are your strengths that can really speak to what they're interested in. Those people are interested in hiring.
Yeah, the specific question about research, I think, for me wasn't quite as relevant only because of what I do. Like, there was no way for me to go out in the job market and pretend like I would study Black people. You know? That's what my research is about. You either want that or you don't. But yeah, I mean, I think there is sort of a larger question about how do you kind of want to go about presenting yourself, you know, and what aspects of yourself do you kind of want to share. I actually was thinking of, I have like a weird epiphany in 2 places, in the shower and in the car. And so I was actually thinking about this question when I was or one of the questions sort of connected to this when I was in the shower this morning. And I was thinking, you know, I was actually kind of naive when I went out on the market because I didn't necessarily go out of my way to, and maybe, I don't know, Judy was actually in the department when I came to interview, so maybe she'll say if anyone noticed this kind of stuff, but, I did kind of wonder, at the time, whether I should do things like, oh, do I need to cover up the fact that I have a tattoo or a nose ring, or do I need to, you know what I mean, like, do I have to kind of, and I just kind of made the decision when I went on the market that I wanted to be in a department where that was gonna be okay. Because once I showed up there, I was gonna have to be myself every day. And so people were just gonna have to learn how to make peace with that. And I didn't want to be in a place where I wasn't gonna be able to be at least most of myself, But now that I kind of look back on it, I'm like, wow, that was kind of risky in a way. I mean, it didn't feel that way to me at the time. But now that I look back on it, I think, I maybe wasn't like as realistic as I could have been about the fact that, you might actually be giving up opportunities at jobs, when you sort of allow yourself to be presented in a particular way. But I think that's a decision that everybody has to make. And like I said, I think for me, and the truth is I still feel this way, I know I would actually just prefer not to have a job at a place where I couldn't just kind of show up and be like who I am, But I mean, you have to be aware of the fact that that is a decision that you're making, and you might find yourself in an interview type situation where people aren't necessarily ready for who you are, and you have to be prepared for the fact that that is a risk you're taking.
I was also going to say that I don't feel like I can be completely who I am in my job.
Yeah.
Although there's a lot of things I want to do and I do. But I don't necessarily need to socialize with my colleagues 24/7. Right? I mean, if I had free time, I would choose to hang out with those folks, right? So I think there's things that you can sorry. I know this comes across as a surprise anyway. But I think there's your professional life, and then there's other aspects of things that you do. And so you might think about, okay, what is it about this position that can allow me to do certain things? And again, you don't have to be like completely yourself there, because I don't want to be completely myself with some of the people that in my departments, right? So, I don't know if that helps.
Can I add?
Yeah, go.
I had a friend whose advisor told her, don't be yourself, at her job interview. And I thought that was the strangest advice ever, because you can be someone else at the job interview and get the job, but like Leslie was saying, you have to show up at the job and be there for at least the next 6 to 7 years, right? And so I think all these suggestions about how to present yourself is really important. What I really liked in terms of my first job when I was at the University of Montana was that all of my colleagues had really well-developed hobbies, which means then, like even before they were tenured, which means then that their private lives were private. They did fly fishing, they were skiers, whatever. But they had well-developed hobbies, and they were like, oh, let's take her skiing on my job talk or job interview. But whatever it meant, I thought this was great, because they have private lives, so there's a public life at the university, and then I can go home and be with the people I want to be with. So on the job interview situation, and when you're talking to them, when you find out about their lives, if they are going to be at the university, if they are at the university all the time, and all the colleagues are like that, then you know that that's what they're like. And if that appeals to you, then that's who you are. But then if they have well-developed hobbies and full family lives, I mean, I had I've had these future colleagues who were bringing their children to this job dinner. It was this 30-person kind of extravaganza. It was really amazing. And they were so horrified because we were at this place with like taxidermy on the walls. This is Montana. But I was like, this is amazing. This is so amazing. Something I can talk about, right? Oh, right, Wyoming. That's right. And they were like horrified. They were like, she's never going to come. She's never going to come. I'm like, that was the selling point of the whole thing. Because everyone came, all the partners, the children, I mean, and they all came. So it showed that not only did they have well-developed private lives, but then they had a professional life that was not hostile. They were actually friends with each other. So you learn a lot in the job situations, but the advanced preparation, and there's sneaky ways of asking those questions that are illegal, like, so are you interested in the schools? So you have to be prepared for those kinds of sneaky questions, because, I mean, I would probably advise you, you probably will have to just answer, you know, and because if you say no, right, I mean, oh, I can't answer, it creates this kind of level of problem. Because I had someone who was drunk, he was like, do you have kids? And he's like, oh, I wasn't supposed to ask you that. But do you? And what are you going to say to that, right? Because he's being false convivial, but he really wants to know. And so I just went in knowing that if they ask, I'm going to be honest. And sometimes they like it. I had a colleague who went out on the job market, she was pregnant, and everyone was like, you're not going to get your job. But in fact, the school that she got the job at, they were excited because they thought that that would mean that she would stay. I mean, that in itself could be a problem. But you know, it was a selling point for her as a candidate. So things that some people think will be detractors will actually become positives, depending on the situation.
I think you can also do research about the institution. So if they have a really good maternity leave policy, right-to-leave policy, or they have a really good spousal partner hiring policy. I mean, those are things we can find out in advance. So I think giving those answers, they'll have different resonances depending on how that institution has established.
I know you have one move on to another question, but just really quickly, I want to
You
underscore
guys are actually
something.
covering a few questions.
Yeah, that Judy said, because I think it's really, really important, and that is that I think it's tremendously useful when you prepare to go out on the job market to rehearse the answers to questions, or at least kind of have a plan about what you would want to say, because yes, it is true that it's illegal for them to ask you if you're married, if you have a partner, if you have children. They ask those questions anyway. I have been asked on almost every interview I've been on some variation of all of those questions. And even though it's illegal, it puts you in a situation, like Lynn was saying, where you either have to answer the question, or you have to be like, why are you asking me an illegal question? You know what I mean? And no one wants to do that in a job interview situation. So you really are kind of forced into a position of answering. And it does mean that it's useful to be prepared, to kind of decide for yourself, how do you want to answer these questions, and to kind of be ready so that when something pops up, like one of these crazy situations I've had happen to me a million times, to kind of be able to figure out what you want your answer to be.
So our next question, have you noticed any difference in journals that you submitted to in regards to how they respond to either racial, ethnic, or gendered research, considering that's what most of us do in so much? I don't know if you know first,
Yes, I have noticed, because given that my research focuses on stereotyping and prejudice and all that, and the reviewers who are likely to review this manuscript are probably not members of an underrepresented group. So they totally do not relate. They don't understand the relevance. They don't understand what the problem is. Like who cares if Latinos or African Americans are stereotyped? Other groups are stereotyped too. Sorority girls, you know. Exactly. So they compare it to that, you know. So it's hard to get the point across. So like, when I work on my manuscripts, I really have to do it based, like, I have to frame it in a way that, like, look, I'm advancing theory, I'm testing this, and not necessarily, I'm looking at this topic because it's actually something important to look at. So that has been my experience.
So you reframe, you reframe it in another way, so
Exactly.
that people consider it legitimate in information reform, even though it should be considered legitimate just for its own basis.
Yeah, I think for U.S. history it's changed a lot. So I can't think of any journals that are openly hostile. Like, Journal of American History is the main U.S. history journal, and it's published a lot more about race. There's also more specialized journals, like Journal of African American History, Journal of Social History. So I think whatever journal you're interested in publishing in, it's really important to take a look at the run of the journal. So maybe take a look at a couple of different issues and see what type of articles they publish. Think about how the articles are framing the significance of the project. I'm teaching a graduate research seminar now, and the students' projects are great, But one of the students is saying, her like big declaration is saying, like, the big significance of this project is, and it just sort of died. Like, there's no big significance. I was like, well, if I'm not interested in X topic, why would I be interested in this research? So you need to be able to kind of frame your project in a way that's really exciting and interesting for people who don't really have an investment in that particular area. And I think that's true for whatever journal we're interested in submitting to.
The next question, I think you guys some of you guys already touched on, but it's the idea of, are you bringing your whole self to work or just parts of you, which I think address that. If so, is that something that you had to relearn? And are there any strategies in doing so? So like if we had worked elsewhere before we came to school, right? Like going to work and being ourselves was maybe not an issue, but in the ivory tower, it might somehow change. And like, what strategies do you use to kind of make that apparent?
Yeah, I definitely don't bring my whole self to work, and I think there's some things about that are kind of natural and normal, and other things about that can sometimes be problematic. The truth is, I think it's important to think, even though the academy tends to function a little bit differently and we imagine it to be really different, the truth is, at least from my perspective, I feel like the academy is a corporation. It's just a corporation that sells education as opposed to selling something else. And so it does mean that this is kind of a professional environment in the way that any other professional environment is. And so, I just don't think it's kind of fully typical for people to kind of bring their whole selves to their work environment. Like, you get to be your whole self in your private life, you know what I mean? But this is a work environment, and so you kind of have to conduct yourself in a professional way. And it kind of, I think that's kind of the nature of the beast, whether we like it or not. So, there's some aspect of that I think is normal. I do sometimes chuckle to myself about it. Like, yesterday I was on my way to campus for a meeting with the provost and like all of the senior academic affairs, advisors. And as I'm driving, down the highway, I'm like pumping Tupac, because that's what I had done. And I just kind of had this flash, like, wouldn't it be funny if like Joe Luna knew that like I was on my way to meet him and I was listening to Tupac? So I mean, I'm not showing up to the meeting and being like, yo, I was listening to Tupac on the way here. It's like, that's not particularly relevant or, appropriate in any kind of a work environment. So, I definitely think,
But it'd be hilarious.
it'd be hilarious. Then I was thinking to myself, I wonder if Joe Ludo even knows who Tupac is.
Maybe he secretly knows.
Right.
Maybe he's a big fan.
That's true. You don't know. And maybe he's not bringing his whole self. Maybe there's parts of him we don't know. But yeah, I mean, yeah, so the truth is, I just think kind of in any sort of professional environment, you don't really bring your whole self to that situation. I guess the part of this that I felt like was particularly relevant for graduate students is that I think you really have to be careful, and I think there's probably people in this room who could testify to this. I think you have to be really careful as a graduate student about talking to other graduate students about your life, because wherever it is, the TA offices, the labs, like wherever it is that you kind of hang out and interact with other graduate students, I see a lot of people nodding, become kind of spaces where people not just only talk about their work, they talk about their teaching, talk about their students, and that kind of spills over and you start telling people stuff about your life and what kind of fellowships you have and what your research is about and blah, blah, blah. And that can become really, really dangerous because, I've seen the whole gamut happen to people, things ranging from having, research topics stolen because you talked too much about what you were doing and what your research was about and what archives you were using, and somebody was like, oh, that's a good idea. You know what I mean? So I've heard things ranging from people getting their research or their topics, stolen to, people talking trash. Well, I don't know why that person got that fellowship because I don't know who they think they are. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I mean, the whole thing. So we're just kind of sharing information about your personal life that,
you probably shouldn't have shared. So I think that's, you know, the thing as graduate students, that it's important for you to